What's going on, y'all? Machiavelli Mills TV. So, I saw an interesting video from Miss Ebony K. Williams. Ebony K. Williams, I believe she's a political correspondent. I've seen her substitute as a moderator on ESPN First Take a few times here and there. And she's on The Real Housewives of New York as well, right? So recently she attended the Chris Rock comedy show. Chris Rock got a little comedy show going on comedy tour. He's on a comedy tour. In fact, my mother and stepfather are going to the Chris Rock comedy show later on tonight. So I'm going to ask them about if they saw what Ebony K. Williams says she saw during her time watching the Chris Rock comedy show. Now, I want to preface my statements by saying this. Ebony K. Williams prefaced her statements by saying she is a lifelong Chris Rock comedy fan. She says she's been a lifelong Chris Rock comedy fan, for real. She said, however, after going to his show recently, she said that Chris Rock was clearly shucking and jiving and curtailing his bits for white claps. She also described his comedy bit as anti-black, and she said that because she said his comedy routine consisted of the I'm black but I'm not an N-word type jokes. You know what I'm talking about? The difference between a black person and an N-word. And she's just like, nah, bro. He was curtailing his bit for white approval and white claps, and undermining, throwing black folks under the bus who have different, nuances to them, or they display certain cultural aspects. I'm assuming, right? And so she was like, nah, she wasn't feeling it, she wasn't having it, right? So you got some people who are up in arms about this, like, hold on, man. Chris Rock can tell a joke. What's wrong with him telling a joke in that manner? Regardless of who the audience is, he's a comedian. Comedians tell jokes like this all the time. What's the big deal? And then you have other people agreeing with Miss Ebony K. Williams and saying, you know what? I'm not feeling Chris Rock when he does that, so on and so forth. So I'm going to get into it. First, black comedians have played up or played into racial stereotypes all the time. They've done it before, without question, right? However, most of the time when black comedians do it, it's not in a way to shame black folks, right? It's not in a way to kind of like, overly clown black folks. It's like a joke, but it's not in a way to shame black people. And Chris Rock may not be trying to shame black folks at all when he tries to tell the I'm black but I'm not an N-word jokes. However, these stereotypical jokes, these jokes about black stereotypes, it hits different coming from Chris Rock. It feels different coming from him. It feels like Chris is shaming black folks when Chris Rock does it for several reasons. One reason in particular is obvious to me. Now, if you ever paid attention to Chris Rock, if you paid attention to his je ne sais quoi, if you pay attention to his aura, it's certain things you can pick up on. Even if you watch the show Everybody Hates Chris, and if it's really loosely based around his life, you can tell Chris probably was a guy that was considered an outcast in black society for a while. Maybe even in school, you know what I mean? Maybe coming up in a comedy scene, he may have been a little ostracized and people was taking a step back away from him. He seems to be a person who was outcasted in black society, for real, right? And while being outcasted, Chris found validation and comfort in the white community who embraced him a lot. Let's be honest, man. White people adore Chris Rock to the heavens. They love him. They worship and love Chris Rock. And it's not to say that black folks don't love and adore Chris Rock as well, because there are plenty of black folks who adore and worship Chris Rock. But I can tell you that Chris Rock's, like, his main fan base is white people. Like, the bulk of his fan base, the majority of his fan base is white people. And it's not just because white folks make up the majority of people in America. That's not the reason why. Because I can tell you, Cat Williams was a hit within the black community. Majority of his fan base was black folks. Even though it was white people that attended the show, majority of Cat Williams' fan base was black. Same can be said for Mr. Bernie Mac, Bernard McCullough from my city, from my hometown, Chicago, Illinois. It was white folks that found Bernie Mac funny, but his main niche, his main audience was black folks. So that doesn't count. Because those comedians were also doing comedy in a world where white people have been the vast majority, but their audience was mostly black. Chris Rock, the opposite end. White folks really, really love him. you know, and he's found validation in their world. They embraced him in the regular world, and in the comedy world. You know, Chris has been embraced by white folks. He got validation from them in their comedy world, and I'm sure in regular society as well. You know, and I think because of that, it feels different from Chris, right? I can tell y'all this right now. I'm 29 years old. Majority of people in my age group do not find, and black folks, majority of black people in my age group do not find Chris Rock funny. They don't. I think he's funny, but a lot of my friends they don't care to see Chris Rock one day of the week at all. And don't talk about nobody younger than me. Black kids younger than me don't care about Chris Rock one bit. They don't think he's funny at all, right? So I say that to say that, but they think Bernie Mac is funny. They think Cat Williams is funny, right? You got people in my age range that think Dave Chappelle is funny. And, you know, but the thing about Dave was embraced and adored by white folks as well. White folks love and adore Dave. And I think and Dave described the fact he didn't grow up in the hood. He didn't grow up around, you know, a whole lot of like just in the inner city, nothing like that, right? But Dave doesn't really tell jokes that like the I'm black, but I'm not an N-word type of jokes the way Chris does, right? But anyway, Chris has found validation within the white community, which is why he let Louis C.K., the comedian dude, say the N-word with the hard ER in that little roundtable discussion from like 2011. It was Jerry Seinfeld, Ricky Gervais, Chris Rock, and Louis C.K. Louis C.K. said, so you telling me I'm a N-I-G-G-E-R? And then Chris Rock says, yes, you're one of the most, you know, I can't even say it. You one of the most N-I-G-G-R-E-S, like N-I-G-G, like it was just so like, come on, bro. He basically called him that. He told him, you are Chris Rock even used the hard ER, right? Letting Louis C.K., a white guy. Now people are like, oh, he's Hispanic origin. I don't know, he looks like a white Hispanic for sure. I thought he looked like just a regular redheaded white guy. But he probably cast him as Hispanic origin. Nonetheless, it's a white guy, right? I don't care what they're talking about, right? He shouldn't be saying an N-word, especially, I don't care if it was with the hard ER or not. He shouldn't have been saying the N-word. And Chris Rock let him say it. And Chris Rock agreed with him. Yes, you are N-word. And Chris Rock was saying you one of the most, it was just like, bro, what? Chris Rock was agreeing with him. Yes, you are N-word. Yes. Because it started off with Chris Rock saying he's one of the blackest white. He said that Louis C.K. is one of the most blackest white guys he ever met. And then Louis C.K. says, you're saying I'm an N-I-G-G-E-R, right? And Jerry Seinfeld is the only one that feels uncomfortable. Like, yo, that's not okay. He shouldn't he shouldn't say that. He shouldn't say that. Ricky Gervais and them laughing their ass off. Ha, 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 kiki cackling. Chris Rock find it so funny. He's smiling from ear to ear, grinning, just so happy. Yes, they laughing at me. Yes, they love this joke. Yes, Chris Rock is laughing and smiling at the white dude, Louis C.K., using the N-word with the hard ER. And the reason why he's okay with that is that Chris got his validation. He became acceptable and accepted by white folks, not even just in the comedy world, but in everyday society. He felt like they probably embraced him more. And again, you can even see it in his show, Everybody Hates Chris. He describes his little brother, Drew, as being the most popular guy that was accepted amongst the block. And Chris Rock has several brothers, so he had a brother. He had a brother in the TV show. He had a brother and a little sister. But in real life, he has several brothers. But I can relate the little brother Drew in the show being synonymous to Tony Rock. Because Tony ain't never, like for real, Tony is never going to be hyped as Chris. He's never going to be in the same, he's never going to be in a list of Pantheon great comedians. But Tony got flair and flavor that you can tell that Chris Rock didn't have growing up. You can tell it. They grew up in the same household, and you probably wouldn't even know they were brothers if they didn't have the same last name. Because they have two different swaggers. And I think that Chris's swagger, for whatever reason, he was outcasted, it seemed like, amongst black people, amongst the black community, black society. And I'm not trying to make fun of Chris if you were different or whatever, because black folks are not monolithic. We come in all different shapes, sizes, and all different type of, we talk different ways, we dress different ways, so on and so forth. But what I'm saying is it appears that Chris was outcasted by black society, which allows him to attach himself to these type of jokes. He gets in front of white folks and tell them type of jokes. And at the same time, it's not cool because you can tell them I'm black, but I'm not an N-word type jokes. And then you got the like white folks in the crowd. I'm sure you got some white folks in that crowd who really don't really rock with black folks like that at all, but they just feel like Chris Rock is the safe black guy. They can be around the safe black guy who will tell some jokes about black folks that they really were like, oh man, okay, Chris Rock is a safe black guy. So they attach themselves to him. And when they hear them jokes he tells, they like, oh, it gives them the chance to say, hey, look, Chris Rock don't like them N-words either. He don't like the N-words. Hey, we're not the only ones. Chris doesn't even like them. Chris is black and he doesn't like the N-words either. Ha ha, ha ha, told you guys, ha ha. Chris doesn't even like them. So no, you got black folks that look like, no, we don't like that type of comedy. And I know, like in like 1999, Chris Rock had a comedy bit where he said, like, he was talking about the difference between black folks and N-words. And I remember I saw that 99. I didn't see that skit, that comedy bit until I was probably like in 2004 when I was like 11 years old. And at the time I thought it was funny, right? But now I recognize, and it had funny moments in it for sure. But now I recognize the way that it can come across to a like majority white crowd. It can look like you throwing black folks under the bus, like you trying to clown on certain aspects of black culture and separate yourself from it to make it seem like you're above that fray, right? You know what I mean? To make you seem like you're above that. And them other ones down there, them N-words. When other black folks, when other black comedians tell jokes about what we call the N-word, what we call each other, they put themselves in that category as well. They don't try to separate themselves from the ilk. They don't try to separate themselves from the fray the way Chris does. Chris tries to separate himself from the fray of that fray of black people that he considers the N-words. He tried to say, that ain't me. That ain't me. That ain't me. That's them. That's them. And I think that's Chris Rock's probably approach around these white comedians in his everyday life. Hey, that's them black folks. Them ain't me, right? The black person that tries to play the good black role, even though he tells crazy jokes and he talks crazy and talks foul as a comedian, that doesn't change the fact that even though he doesn't talk clean, it doesn't change the fact that some black folks like to separate themselves from other black parts of society and just say, I'm not them, I'm better than them, right? Rather than saying, hey man, this is our people, we got to cut that out. He tried to say, hey, that's them right there. That ain't me, that ain't them. He tried to separate the black society in making a black hierarchy to say, oh no, I'm above that. And which creates, and I know y'all probably like, what is he talking about? But when you do that, it creates a moment where you can be looked at as the good black, right? The same way Sinbad said when he did clean comedy, white people would come up to him and say, why can't they all be like you? Hey man, why can't they all be like you? And he said, no, I'm not gonna be your good black to where you can put them down below me and put me on a pedestal to pull them down. You're not gonna put me on a pedestal to pull them down, right? Because at the end of the day, they're my brothers and sisters. They tell jokes a certain type of way. Yeah, some stuff may be a little wild and raunchy, but it is what it is. That's their style. But you're not gonna use me as a way to like undermine them or throw them under the bus. But Chris allows himself, he does it himself. He separates himself from that fray and be like, oh, that's them black folks. While you got comedians like Cedric the Entertainer and Bernie Mac who make these jokes about stuff that black people do, but they include themselves in it. They're not trying to separate themselves from them black folks, right? And so people have always felt like, you know, and again, Chris is a guy who's adored by white folks and he gets that white validation, and Chris plays into it a lot of times, right? Some people even felt like that, and I felt like this too, when Chris was hosting the Oscars during the time the Oscars So White movement was going on. And Chris was in there making jokes at the Oscars about the Oscar So White movement at the expense of black people, trying to cozy up to white folks and make them comfortable. He was in there like, I'm talking about Sambo and All Evening. Chris can be looked at as a man who seeks, Chris can be looked at as a man who tries to make white people comfortable in any way possible or make them laugh in any way possible, even if it means throwing other black people under the bus. I'm stuttering, I'm sorry. Right? Chris can be looked at as a man to try to make white people comfortable in any way or make them laugh in any way possible. Try to get that he out of them, that ha out of them in any way, even if it means throwing other black folks under the bus. Because it was during that Oscar So White movement when he was like, you know, hosting the Oscars. It was during that time where he joked about Jada Pinkett like joining the Oscar So White movement by saying that he made a joke saying she shouldn't even be invited anyway. She shouldn't be invited anyway. That's what Chris was saying. Chris allowed himself to be used as a prop by the Oscars to undermine that Oscar So White movement, which had black folks backing it up. other black popular actors and actresses, they were backing that movement up, and Chris allowed himself to be used as a prop by the Oscars to undermine it. Man. People are like, hold on, Chris, what the hell is wrong with you, bro? Like, why are you that thirsty for white validation? Are you that thirsty for white acceptance? And when Chris does the whole bit about, the separation between, hey, I'm black, but I'm not an N-word, there are some older black people who will say that Chris is just telling the truth, and Chris is jokingly holding black people accountable for degeneracy within our community, right? You have some older black people that will say, well, Chris just making a joke, he telling the truth, and he holding black people accountable for degeneracy in our community, right? But to younger black people, younger like 50 years old and younger, to black people of that age group, like there are certain conversations, we look at it like, look, it's certain conversations we don't have in front of white folks. It's not, because it's an opportunity for them to get laughs in about us, and for them to like be validated in their anti-black rhetoric or their anti-black racist stances. I'm sorry. And I'm not saying all white people are racist. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you have some white people, you have some racist white people who are anti-black, and when they go to shows where you got a black man trying to separate himself from, oh, look at them N-words over there. Look at them N-words. I'm not one of those N-words. You have those anti-black racist people in the crowd who will latch on to those sentiments and feel validated in their stances from these type of comedy bits. And that's why we say, no, there's certain conversations we ain't having in front of them, because they will feel validated in those stances. We can talk about it amongst each other, right? And there are times where I felt like this. Like, no, we don't need to have these conversations in front of white folks or other non-black people in general. Not even just white folks. We don't need to have these conversations in front of other non-black folks. I felt like this at certain times. And I remember feeling like this in particular when Bill Cosby did the Pound Cake tour or whatever, right? And he was on his little comedy tour. And Bill Cosby is another man who was, at one point, adored and loved by white folks, because Bill presented a different image of the black American man in the black family, which I loved and which was great for us to show the Cosby Show on television. I love the Cosby Show because as a black man from the hood of Chicago, Illinois, we had financial problems at times, it was great to see a black family that didn't have financial issues and worries. They were doctors. The mom was a lawyer. The dad was a doctor, gynecologist. The kids went to school. Now they had their hiccups, but they lived affluently, and they were doing it well, and they were good people. Like, it was just showing black love and black excellence on TV. And we also saw that in a different world, two Bill Cosby shows. So I felt conflicted, because I'm like, man, I love these shows, and I love Bill Cosby for these shows that he produced. But when I watch him in front of white folks try to talk down to black people, telling us y'all bad parents, pick your pants up, pull your pants up, this stuff is happening to you because you look how you're dressing. He's preaching respectability politics that a lot of older black people latch on to, that younger black folks like me can never get with, right? Yes, we know it's a time to be professional at work, but outside of that, it's older black people that think if you dress a certain way and talk a certain way, you will be fine, and white folks you won't be subjected to racism. And the reason why you're probably subjected to racism is because of the way you carry yourself or the way you dress. The way you dress is dictating the racist behavior towards you. And the way to stop that is to just dress better. No. Or to talk in a certain tone, to be looked at as not looked at as vile, or to be not looked at as a heinous black man. There are black people who play into respectability politics, right? But you know what I mean? I'm not one of the younger black folks don't feel like that. It's younger black folks that don't feel like that. And that's why I think you can see a separation between Chris Rock and some black folks that don't identify with respectability politics in certain ways, right? And it's different because Bill Cosby was talking about pants sagging and all this and all that, and Chris ain't talking about that. But I'm saying, I remember feeling a similar way when I watched the comedies, like when I watched Bill Cosby talk down to black folks in front of white folks, and white folks clapping and laughing and clapping it up. And I'm, yes, black white folks in there. Yes, Bill, talk about them. Yes, tell them the truth. Tell them to pull those pants up. Tell them to stop talking like that. Tell them to raise those kids better. Tell them how the black man fell. Tell them it's the black man's fault that everything is going on to them. Tell them the black man, if the black father is gone, so that's why they going. That's why they getting killed. That's why the police are killing them, because the black father ain't there. That's why. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's why they getting killed. It's a lot of black folks that got killed that had fathers in their home, and fathers that was raising them every day of the week that was getting killed by law enforcement all the time, right? But Bill was in there. he was chummying up to him with them jokes and making them feel validated in their anti-black stances. And I was like, I felt that in my spirit as a young boy that something wasn't right with that. I was a young kid and was like, hold on, this doesn't feel right. White folks clapping and stuff, and you talking about black folks ain't parenting their kids right and pull up your pants and all this and all of that. You know, it just didn't feel right. And then look what happened with Bill. Bill got into some other trouble, and then they switched up on him. They weren't clapping for him no more after that. You know, and so yeah, but I say that to say, like, there are certain conversations, certain things that shouldn't be said in front of white folks or non-black people. That shouldn't be said in front of non-black folks. And Chris is a guy, and again, I'm sure Ebony, she described herself as a lifelong Chris Rock fan. So she saw that bit from 99 when he talked about the difference between black folks and N-words. And I'm sure it had to be something deeper than that. Something deeper than that to have Ebony K. Williams saying, hold the hell on. Chris, what the hell is this? Where she had to get up and leave the comedy show because she couldn't bear it no more. It was something beyond. It had to be something different from that. If she describes herself as a lifelong Chris Rock fan and she saw that bit, it had to be something way worse than that. You know, but Chris has had a tendency because white folks are the ones who really, really adore him. Again, black folks find him funny. He got a lot of black fans, black comedians who love him. They do. But his majority of his fan base is white folks, right? And again, you can say the same about Dave Chappelle, but Dave doesn't acquiesce or try to be chummy with them in order to seek validation from them. He doesn't. Chris will do it to seek validation from them. You know, and with those things that I described, the Oscars So White movement, when he was hosting the Oscars, when you had him talking about when you had him letting Louis C.K. say the N-word with the hard ER, and he talks about, you know, and again, I think Chris tells jokes where he's trying to separate himself from black folks or from that's those N-words down there. I'm up here. Those are the N-words down there. You know, to try to make himself seem more appealing and appeasing to the white community, which they already feel like he's a safe black man anyway, which is why they love him so much. And because he's funny too. He's funny for sure. He's funny. He got funny jokes. He's a funny guy, right? But yeah, they say feel real comfortable around Chris. You know, and I think because Chris was clearly probably outcasted amongst black folks coming up, and he found validation and acceptance from the white community, from the white crowd who loved him and embraced him in comedy, which in turn had them embrace him in real life. And he feels he likes that validation. He likes that around him. And I'm not saying that Chris hasn't called out racism before, because he has called out racism before. You know, when police brutality was going on, he's called that out for sure. But then he would have, but those moments can get subsided when he tries to separate himself and try to talk about black folk degeneracy in front of white people to get laughs. Try to talk about black degeneracy in front of white folks to get laughs. And it's like, people are like, no, I don't feel that. Because we know where Chris seeks his validation from. You can tell. Him and Tony Rock got two different styles, two different flavors about them. You can tell Tony was probably embraced and accepted with open arms, or he probably was, I'm sure he was embraced within black community, within the black society. Chris Rock seems to be a guy who was outcasted within it, and it even is displayed in the show Everybody Hates Chris at times. For sure. And then he was getting called the N-word every single day and all type of racist stereotypes by the white dude who was at the school beating up and bullying him. You know, but yeah, man, but I gotta ask my mom and my stepfather what they think about the show after tonight, but I had to make this video for this time being, man. I'm gonna let y'all know what they thought about it. But if he doing the same bit that Ebony K. Williams saw, I wonder, you can't tell because it's not recorded. He's not gonna let you have your phones. My mama said she walked past the Chicago theater. I think it's at the Chicago theater. They like, hey, no, you got to put your phones up. You can't bring them in there. You got to put them in this little lock box or something like that where you can't get to your phone. It's by your seat or something. You got to put it somewhere. I don't know. But they not letting you record. So who's to say if he switched up his comedy routine after seeing the Ebony K. Williams thing? Or maybe he kept it the same because he probably don't care. Who knows? But I'm going to ask my mom if they feel like Ebony K. Williams felt when she was watching the show. But yeah, Chris has sought white validation for a long time. And I can tell you because that's who he was accepted and embraced by the most. Machiavelli Mills TV, I'm out. Peace.